Hello and welcome to the podcast, The Way of the Sensitive. I'm your host, Cara Wilde. This is a podcast for those of us who feel called to live in a different way, to create a new society where diversity and uniqueness is celebrated, not shamed. We're the channels of the light, co-creating a heaven on earth upon this beautiful planet. We're here to live and achieve our soul's goals in this lifetime. To us, it's not woo, it's real. Calling all the magic makers, the mystics, the empaths, the sensitives, the starseeds, the autistic ones, sometimes sidelined, sometimes scapegoated, but we know that we're here to create new pathways in the one mind, because it's not just about traversing alternative dimensions, it's also about landing and being fully alive in this gorgeous world. Hey sensitives, and welcome to podcast episode 16. And before I talk about what to expect in this podcast, I'd really like to know how you listen to this podcast. Are you listening to it while you're driving, while you're with your kids, while you're doing the washing up? Is it on in the background? I'd really like to get a feel for how people listen to the podcast and whereabouts they are. It kind of helps me feel a bit more connected to you as an audience, I think. So if you want to post in the free Facebook group or just send me an email and let me know, I'd really like that. So on today's show, we have Lisa Akers. And Lisa Akers is the only herbalist I know that is also a spaceship builder. Yes, a real life spaceship builder. And she works with people who are struggling to solve complicated health problems and who aren't finding a solution. And I love her tagline, which is hope for healing when nothing else works. And for those of us that are sensitives, where medication tends not to work, either we're resistant to it like I was, and I talk about that in this episode, or we're just so sensitive to it, it sends us into a spiral. Lisa is a herbalist and a spaceship builder, and she specialises in guiding highly sensitive people to nurture their relationship with themselves through the sacred practice of holistic herbalism for deep and lasting wellness. As a scientist, she builds a personalised strategy for rebuilding health from the foundation up, and Lisa enjoys working with people who are hearing the quiet whispers of discomfort that are dismissed by family, friends and health practitioners as too sensitive or just part of getting older. Her practice is grounded in the belief that everything is connected. We just need to learn to listen and nourish ourselves deeply and soulfully. Now, I reckon that sounds like quite a few of us, right? And in this episode specifically, what we talk about is defining autoimmune disease, because I don't know about you, but I wasn't really clear on what that means, how that might link to trauma. We talk about the symptoms of imbalance, what to look out for, whether you've got a autoimmune disease or you're just a sensitive that's trying to thrive. And, it's like with our family, with the autism pathway, I'm never after a cure because I don't want to be cured, but I am looking for constantly for different ways to remain stable and balanced, because we kind of need alternative solutions. And we talk about how to nourish the body in a way that builds resilience and that strengthens intuition. And I loved some of Lisa's reframes that came up on this, which was, first of all, her reframe on what is positive about being a sensitive, and then also how we can use food to strengthen our intuition, and how connecting with ourselves in this way strengthens intuition. And I asked her how spaceship building informs her role as a herbalist, and there's a very interesting answer to that, and that made me cry. You'll be surprised. I know, you'll be surprised, but it is just beautiful. The way that she describes the relationship between space and body made me want to build spaceships. And also talks about a tracking log, which is a free resource on Lisa's website, where there's lots of free resources, and I put links to that in the show notes, and a very, very simple way of how you can start tracking your balance or imbalance and what foods or environments or practices work for you and which work against you. So it's packed full of information. Lisa has been through her own journey, which you'll hear about soon, which is why she's doing what she's doing now. Come over to the Facebook group, and I would love to have a really good conversation about how sensitives thrive in physical reality based on some of the information that you found in this podcast. Okay, see you on the other side. Hello everybody, and welcome to the Way the Sensitive podcast, and this is episode 16. And today we are joined by Lisa Akers. Hi Lisa.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me on.
I'm excited to be here. Welcome. And just for the audience, I've just been chatting to Lisa, and it's 6:30 in the morning where she is. I think we can just make out the kind of daybreak coming through. So thank you for putting us at the top of your morning.
Yeah, just barely.
Yeah. Okay, so I have already introduced you and what you do, and a question that I tend to ask people when we're doing these kind of interviews is, what do you really like about being a sensitive?
I think the most wonderful thing about being sensitive is this opportunity you have to live bigger. You know more about what's going on about other people. And so it just gives you that opportunity to take in and expand the boundaries that you have set for yourself. Because when you know more about the boundaries around you, you can push on it and say, I don't think that boundary is real. Let's try and make that bigger. How can I explore that? And as a sensitive person, you can explore it without having to be, if you're not paying attention and you're not really listening to your intuition, you're not listening to the messages you're receiving, either physically or energetically, then you tend to do more of the bull in the china shop approach, and you just go push on things really hard. But as a sensitive person, you get the opportunity to intuit. You contemplate before you actually jump out and go do something. And so it gives you that chance to be and to just become bigger. A bigger light in the world.
I have never heard that answer before. That is about, about sensitives leaning into those boundaries and kind of understanding them from that intuitive feeling place to see how true they are and whether they want to keep them. And I think as an antidote, like as a reframe to the usual feeling about being sensitive, is that like wanting to withdraw, that's a gorgeous way of looking at it. Actually it's a really good way of expanding in a way that is supportive and helpful. So thank you for that. I like that. So
you're welcome.
I know, we've spoken before. Just for the audience, we've already done one of these interviews, and the tech just was not happening, was it? It wasn't happening. So I know from previous conversation that I've had with you, and also looking at your website, is you're all about supporting sensitives, and particularly I love your tagline, hope for healing when nothing else works. And I know that your work now is a result of your own personal journey. So could you just let people know, what your personal journey was and how you got here?
Sure. So in addition to being
Can I just say, I love that. I love that, and I love that I have a spaceship builder on the podcast. Ego to one side, but that's very cool. Yeah, sorry, carry on.
No, that's cool. So it's a job that's occasionally, more often than occasionally, really intense, requires a lot of attention, requires a lot of time, requires a lot of focus. And we were in the midst of building, 2012 through 2014. And I was away from home, living out of a hotel for 2 years, working 100-hour weeks at a minimum. When you get off work at 2 a.m, the only thing open is fast food drive-thrus. And so it was a very difficult time for me emotionally because I was putting my entire heart and soul into this. Plus, I was away family. I was living out of a hotel, which has all kinds of complications to it. And I was eating whatever I could
Yeah.
find. Very much a scavenger kind of lifestyle rather than being able to take the time to nourish myself well. And I was just pushing through, taking medications as I needed to deal with the headaches, to deal with the pain, to deal with the digestive upset, all of that stuff. You could just cover it up with a drug and get going back to work. And it really wasn't until we got to the end of that project, I pushed through, I was able to just, hold my will and make that happen. And when we got to the very end, I came home and it just all came crashing down around me. Um, I had horrible migraines every day. Um, I had digestive problems that, I couldn't be too far from home or too far from a regulator.
Yeah.
Um, every joint in my body ached. It took me 10 minutes to get out of bed in the morning just because I had to go so slowly to let my joints even out and stop hurting. I couldn't even walk in the morning. My feet hurt so bad. Um, and I kept going to doctor after doctor after doctor and got no answers. They always said, well, you're probably just tired. Why don't you rest more? Okay, well, I can't sleep because, well, here, take some sleeping pills. No, that's not helping either. That makes it worse.
Mm.
And every time I would go to the doctor, they'd give me a new medication, and the new medication did nothing to make it better. So finally, because I was so frustrated with the entire system, I found an herbalist who helped me work through some of this, and we started making the connections that, oh, hey, your diet is really contributing to this. Come to find out, I'm gluten and dairy sensitive. I have celiac disorder. So all of those things were a result of that huge stress moment in my life, and the diet, that all combines and builds up, and eventually it just kind of overflows. And I like to think of that overflow as the trigger that causes
Right.
autoimmune disease. And I see it time after time after time, is you get to a point where the bucket of toxins in your body finally just overflows, shuts down, and goes, I give up.
Right.
Okay, fine.
Yeah. And that's what yours did, kind of like a bit of a you need to pay,
Exactly.
you need to pay attention to this, or trying to get your attention
Absolutely.
through that body wisdom.
Yes.
So working with that herbalist and changing your the food that you ate, and were you able to
Mhm.
make sustainable changes?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, it wasn't just as simple as changing one part of my diet shift.
Hmm.
It required some diet changes, some lifestyle changes, like sleeping more, exercising
Right.
differently. Not really more, but differently. Um, it required a shift in my spiritual
Ooh.
practice. I hadn't been particularly spiritual up until that point. I mean, I had religious beliefs and I had, this foundation, but I really didn't have an ongoing quiet time practice.
Right.
And that was an important part to add
Oh,
in.
that's
Um,
interesting.
so many times, especially in our modern society where we're all connected, we're always taking in
Yeah.
information. Okay, well, I'm bored. Let me go check my
Yeah.
phone and see what I've missed. You're taking
Yeah.
in, you're taking in, you're taking in. We seldom let out.
Right.
And so taking that quiet time is that opportunity to clear out let your brain go, here's what I think today. And so even if it's not a meditation where you're sitting there quiet, trying to not think about something, which is hard, um, just going on a 5-minute walk and
Yeah.
talking to yourself is a great way to just let that out. And that's as much a part of detoxifying
I love the
as
way that you've
cleaning up your
described that.
diet.
So spiritual practice then is that expression, that kind of detoxing of stuff, but it's also like about reconnecting to you, which is like the best
Exactly.
spiritual connection. But I love the way that you've described that as like it's we take stuff in all the time, but we don't let things out. That expression and making time for
Right.
that. That's gorgeous. So, go on.
Yeah. I was just going to say that, I really think that that's the biggest part of stars. Everyone thinks that we do sacred wrong. They're all worried if they're not going to go follow, okay, I'm going to go to this church and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that, that if we're not following the crowd, we're doing it wrong. But it's really so much just, here's what it means for me. Here's what nourishes my spirit. And I think if you just focus on that, then it gives you a much
because
deeper
we
connection.
can have like these guidelines, can't we? That it means that we've got to do yoga, we've got to do mantras, we've got to do mindful practice. There's all sorts of things that we have to do, but the whole idea of that spirituality is that it, like you say, it works for us, it nourishes us, and it supports us. And it's interesting that was sounds like that's been quite a big piece for you then, from what you've said.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's a big piece in the work that I do with my clients as well, because they often spiritual practice, and we don't want to jump in and all of a sudden make them into Buddhist monks or anything like that. We want to just start with, okay, let's go talk to yourself. Talk to yourself in the bathroom if it embarrasses you to do it in public, but just put earphones in. People think you're on the phone.
Yeah. Okay. So it's your kind of experience and what worked for you that you then teach your clients and work with them. It sounds like it's like a whole kind of, like you say, like a life map that you do.
Right. Yeah. When I work with clients, we're going to be addressing 6 different areas of their health. So their nutrition, how much they're sleeping, their movement, their environment, the chemicals that are in and around them, the things that they're taking in through their skin, that they're breathing in, that they may be dealing with on a regular basis, their stress levels, and then resilience, because you have to build on all of those aspects in order to get a real true picture of health. And I really believe that your health is very much like being in a room where the roof overhead has 100 holes in it and it's raining. And oftentimes our medical is going to fill up all 100 holes up above you. And I tend to look at it differently as I've got 100 holes. If I make a 5% improvement in all 100 holes, then that's a huge improvement from a collective standpoint. It may not fix everything, but it's going to make a big impact on their quality of life and the way that they're able to exist in the world. So then you start looking at which holes, and then you start looking at some of those environmental things. I can change that, take that out completely, make that go away. Or a food issue, okay, I can take that out away. And then the other things you just kind of work at and build up slowly. And over time, that results in a much better quality of life than, okay, well, here, take this pill, and it's going to fill up this hole.
The short-term stopgap. Yeah, which can be helpful, I guess, in a short period of time. But it's...
I think it's really hard, the medicine approach for sensitives especially, because pharmaceuticals are this hammer on a bell. If you think of your health as a bell that's swinging back and forth in balance, the pharmaceuticals just slam into it on one side and really push you to the far extent. It's going to really stop. And then your body is going to naturally swing back into balance, because that's what it does. It's always seeking balance. So if you push it with a pharmaceutical, your body's going to push back equally hard. And so I like to look at it in a nudge. That, okay, maybe I've got balance off to the side a bit. Well, we can nudge that back into balance without having to create a big response. And that's the beauty of herbal approaches. Sledgehammer to your system, it's just a little nudge. And it takes a little more time, it takes a little more effort, but you can always just nudge it back in, and then you don't get the rebound effect that you often get
Yeah,
from
that makes
pharmaceuticals.
sense. And from personal experience as a highly sensitive person, they don't
Hmm.
work. You know, when I've had medication, especially for like,
Sometimes.
there were when years and years ago when I was really bad with anxiety and I mean, I can just see if I'd have applied some of what you're saying back then I would have cleared up a lot of anxiety. But it was, you know, it was a mental health issue at the time for panic attacks and things. The medication they did
Hmm.
not touch me at all, and yet I can take a painkiller and I feel spaced out on a really low medication
Right.
space painkiller. And also I had what the doctors defined as faulty valves in my stomach. They weren't working properly, and I was losing blood through my stomach as well, which was leading to
Oh, goodness.
which was leading to like being anemic. And the tablets they give me for that didn't do anything, didn't touch it. But I ended up resolving past trauma, and that sorted it out. So I
Wonderful.
really get that it's not just that we're really sensitive to medication. Sometimes it's just it just misses the mark completely. Um, so
Right.
in your work, you talk about autoimmune disease. Can you just define
Right.
that for us?
Sure. So an autoimmune disease is what happens when your body's immune system starts to look at your own tissue as
Right.
an enemy. Um, Women especially are prone to autoimmune disease because our immune system is stronger.
I
It
had no
was
idea.
designed that way. Well, we carry babies, and our purpose evolutionary, the survival of the species. So women have a stronger immune system than men do because you have to not only maintain the immunity for yourself, but also for a child. Whether you ever get pregnant or not, the innate immune system in the female body is stronger than that in the male body. So that sets us up for some unfortunate things when our immune system goes haywire. Um, Usually an auto trigger, not always, but it usually is some sort of trigger that could be an accident, say a major car accident, or you fall or you get into some sort of um, problem at home or whatever, um, or a major illness. Pneumonia often causes it, or if you happen to get bronchitis or Lyme disease, those kinds of things tend to be triggers. An emotional event.
Mm,
Pregnancy sometimes will cause it, which is both an emotional and a physical
mm-hmm.
event. A marriage or divorce can be traumatic in some cases. So a lot of times those big emotional events can also trigger it because, as we talked about already, stress is a huge impact on your health. And that's similar to what you've seen as well, is that those past emotional stresses tend to build up as much as the physical stresses. That trigger happens and your immune system is on high alert. All of these things are happening. Your immune system is out looking around, looking for any sort of invader, pathogen, bacteria that might be in your system, and it's attacking full force. And then after the whatever that trauma is calms down, your body's immune system
Right.
doesn't get the
Right.
message. And it keeps on attacking and it keeps on attacking and it keeps on attacking and it starts. So it looks for thyroid tissue, which becomes either Graves' disease or Hashimoto's. It looks for connective tissue, which could be lupus. It could be mixed connective tissue disorder. It could be rheumatoid arthritis. It starts looking at your pancreas, becomes
Mm,
type 1 diabetes. Starts looking at nerve tissue, could be multiple sclerosis, could be the immune system can go after, expresses as a different autoimmune disease. It's the same underlying function. The immune system is
yeah.
attacking itself, but it expresses differently. And so we've called those expressions different diseases, although ultimately
Right.
they're really
Okay.
all the
And
same.
so, what are some of the you talk about the like having symptoms of imbalance as well on your website. What are some of those
Mm-hmm.
symptoms?
Mm-hmm. So I think the things that tell you that you're out of balance are ongoing pain in areas that has no explanation, headaches, joint pain, muscle pain. It could be pain in your gut, a digestive type thing where you're feeling constant pressure or pain as you digest food. You're also going to see you should be having 1 to 2 well-formed bowel movements every day. That's normal. If you're not doing that, despite what anyone tries to tell you, it's not normal. You may have anxiety and depression are key symptoms. If it's not getting better with whatever the medication that you're on, if it's truly medication for that and you're not getting better, it may be because it's a symptom of being imbalanced somewhere else, similar to your experience. It wasn't a mental health thing, it was an imbalance elsewhere that was creating that. You're also going to see fatigue, crushing fatigue sometimes. Insomnia.
Yeah.
You're exhausted, but you can't sleep. You're going to see dry and brittle, fingernails being dry and brittle, dry eyes. You have a hard time regulating your body temperature. It may be summer and you're feeling like you need to wear a coat, or it may be winter and you're shedding off all of the layers. But what you're experiencing is not in sync with the broader community. You may feel like you're feeling always bloated, that your stomach's always full, and so you're not ever hungry, and so you don't eat, which cascades to other problems. Or you may feel ravenously hungry. So either of those extremes could indicate an out of balance condition. Frequent infections, bladder infections or yeast infections of some sort, ear infections in children. Anytime you're having this ongoing chronic infection, then that's signaling an.
So what I'm hearing there then is that I'm imagining that there's like a sliding scale as well. So some of us, sensitives, I know from my experience that I experience anxiety if I have too much grain. And I remember talking to you about this before, and the first time, because I did the Whole30, where you take out all for people that don't know, you take out all grains, soy, dairy, all the things that are known to cause inflammation or to cause that people can have some sensitivities to. And when I first did that, I was like, what am I going to eat? What am I going to eat? But I couldn't believe how quiet my body became. And something that I always thought was just like this underlying anxiety was my reaction and my sensitivity to grains. I mean, I'm not as bad now and I can eat them. And I have to be careful with dairy. If I have too much dairy, I start getting eczema under my eyes. I've just started because I've had a few more dairy things than I would normally do, and it's just like, okay, let's go back to that choice point of what I want to do. But I think we just don't realize, I think a lot of us that are sensitives can just like live with this underlying noise from our bodies that is, even if we don't have some of those autoimmune diseases that you talk about, just like getting used to having this noise, really. I mean, what would you suggest if you are a sensitive who's like, actually, that might be me. I might be that. It's not drastic, but it's kind of a bit of a noise. Where would you suggest the starting point would be?
I think the first thing that you need to do, and this is the first thing when I work with somebody, whether they have an autoimmune disease or not, is to start paying attention to what your body is telling you. And it tells you every single day.
Right.
You get amazing feedback from your body. You get your elimination habits. For women who are not menopausal, you get your period every month. That's a great indicator of your health. You get feedback almost instantly on the food that you eat. Within 90 minutes, you know if the food you've eaten is going to be good for you or not. headaches, if you're having headaches, better and worse over time. We tend to chalk them up to, oh, it's the weather, or oh, I'm just older, or I worked really hard yesterday. And so you tend to chalk those things up to some external stimulus rather than looking, okay, I did something. What did I do, and how did that affect me? So I think that keeping track of what's going on in your body helps give you that knowledge so that
So
you
I
can
think
make
this is
better
where
choices.
I've had a sneak peek look at your resources library that you've got. It's for anybody listening. It's a free library that you just need to give your email to, and you can get free access to. And there's lots of information in there. And you have
Mhm.
the activity log, the free resource in there that could help with that.
Yeah, it's a health tracking log. It's a downloadable. You can download it and print as many copies as you like. And it's designed to be easy. It's designed to be have you write down everything you ate. I don't have you write down, I got up at this time and I did this today. It's not that detailed. It's really just as simple as, did I eat at a meal today something that contained any of the six major allergens? So gluten, dairy, corn, soy,
Mm-hmm.
nuts, and eggs. Um, and if I did, how much? And sometimes you don't know. Say if you're dining out, you wouldn't necessarily know if there was some sort of allergen in there. So about this meal. It gives you a space to track exercise or movement that you do during the day, any particular notes. Say it was your cousin's wedding and you were out at the wedding all day. That's a significant event. It's probably worth writing down because it says that today's activities were different than what
Mm-hmm.
I do on a normal basis. So it just gives you that space to track it. And it's easy enough that you don't have to worry about it. You could go at the end of the day, 2 or 3 minutes, no big deal. But having that information to look back and say, what happened 2 days ago that might be causing this symptom? Especially with food intolerance like gluten and dairy, sometimes the symptoms won't show up for 48 hours.
Right.
So I don't remember what
Yeah.
I had for breakfast yesterday. Thinking about what I did 2 days ago really becomes complicated. So if you've got it written down, that's a great resource on
Yeah, that's
and start to
brilliant.
see patterns.
Yeah, I'll put a link to that in the show
Okay,
notes
great.
as well. And so one of the things that's occurring to me is when we're thinking about like sensitivities to food and dairy, I know we're all unique and we all respond in a different way, but is there things that if we are sensitive to
Hmm.
dairy, then it tends to show up like this? Or because I know like my daughter,
Sure.
I know now. And we went and got tested. Well, they did, both my son and daughter, and they're highly sensitive, borderline intolerant to dairy. And it created eczema in my daughter around
Hmm.
her lips. She used to go red there. Um,
Hmm.
and the doctor was just saying it's because she was licking her lips. But actually, we discovered if she didn't have
Right.
dairy, she didn't get it. And the same for me. So, is there like
Hmm.
with the different foods, is there a tendency, or is it too individual to say?
Well, no, it's not. There's certainly a tendency. I find that um, if you're having diarrhea, gas, bloating, um, digestive discomforts that accelerate the flow
Right,
of food through your body, it tends to be
right,
grains. If you're having things that slow down your elimination
right.
process, it tends to be dairy. Um, Dairy also will often show
Yeah.
up just as like your experience, but rosacea tends to be gluten.
What's rosacea?
Uh, Rosacea is where you have the reddening of the cheeks and the nose and
Oh,
the
yeah,
little
yeah,
bumps along, the swollen nose. Different skin experience, but same kind of thing. The body is going to want to take things that
yeah.
it doesn't want to push them up and out. So sometimes it pushes it up and out through eruptions. Sometimes it's out through your digestive tract. So there's lots of different ways that the body pushes things out. Um, so I also find, dry scalp, dandruff type things are usually a
Right.
gluten problem. And those can also be related to gluten in your shampoo and conditioner. So wheat protein often shows up as a
Oh my God, I wouldn't
ingredient
have thought
in
of that.
shampoos and conditioners. So if gluten sensitivity, look and see what you're putting on your body as well as in it. Um, card, yeah, and let's see, cardiovascular type involvement, so high blood pressure and rapid heart rate tend to be more
Okay.
dairy. So, and then soy tends to affect your hormones negatively. So you're going to have strange periods. You're going to have the hormonal type of acne breakout, not the sensitivity type. So those kinds of things are going to be more prevalent with
Okay.
soy. Yeah, and as you get into the other less common ones, it becomes more difficult to say, oh, well, fish allergies cause this, or fish
Mm.
sensitivities cause this. So that
So,
becomes more difficult.
have you come across people that have got sensitivities and then they've done something different and they've healed their sensitivities so that they're not as impacted as food as they once was?
Um, well, so you never heal the sensitivity. You're always going to be sensitive to it. If you have a sensitivity to dairy, your body's always going to create an immune response to it. What happens over time when you take it out of your system for a long period is you start to empty this bucket. Everything that goes into your body that your body can do nothing with goes into a bucket full of toxins out and it disposes them. When you are continually eating foods that you're sensitive to, that bucket stays
Right.
full, and sometimes it
Yeah.
overflows. Um, as you work to take things out of the bucket through your environment, through your diet, through your spiritual practice, through your exercise, then the bucket level goes down. And you can occasionally throw in some grains or throw in some dairy, and it doesn't have the same huge
Yeah.
systemic reaction.
Okay. So I think as well for my audience, I think it's worth pointing out my own personal experience and belief system. I think is there might be a difference between foods that our bodies are kind of naturally sensitive to and will always be, but also foods that our bodies kind of created a traumatic response to. And I'll tell you why is because I
Mm-hmm.
used to be allergic to fish ever since I was little. It used to make me like vomit every time I had fish. And then I did a course in, it's called tapas acupressure technique. So it's working with your energy
Okay.
system, a bit like EFT, it's an EFT cousin, to heal trauma. And it specializes in allergies. So I did one to fish and realized that like my reaction to fish was my way of saying no to some things that were going off in my childhood, and I can eat fish ever since I did it. I don't have
Wonderful.
that thing. But I
Mm-hmm.
tried doing the same thing with grains, and although I lessened the symptoms, I know it still doesn't suit my body type because I've got a sensitivity to it. So I think, it's worth
Right.
thinking about that trauma reaction.
All
Yeah.
right. Absolutely. Yeah, and those are things
Yeah.
that you learn by keeping track. When you say, okay, I'm going to clear out my diet for 30 days, 40 days, 6 weeks, um, and at the end of that time, I've calmed down the noise,
Mm,
like you said, and I can actually hear what the messages are. I'm not trying to filter out all of these different bits of noise that are
yeah.
confusing what I'm
Yeah.
trying to
So,
understand.
can we talk about one food group that I know virtually every sensitive and empath that I come across seems to really struggle with it? I mean, I think we all do, like in the human population, but it seems to be more for sensitives, and that's sugar. It's like,
Hmm.
because I know that a lot of people use, a lot of my empath friends and clients use sugar and probably grains as well, but primarily sugar to soothe the overwhelm that comes from being around people, picking up all their energies. It's like all that emotional overwhelm, emotional information, and it's like the first thing to reach for is sugar. And I don't know why, because it just makes everything more magnified and noisy, but I think it might be to do with the feel-good chemicals that we get from it. But I don't know if you've got any, thoughts
Right.
on that.
Well, sugar substances, white sugar doesn't exist in nature. We have to do a lot to refine it. Here in the States, I know almost all of the white table sugar that you buy and that it's used in producing processed foods is made from genetically modified plants. So they are soaked in herbicide before they ever get to the processing plant. I think that everyone is going to have trouble with that because our body is not intended to absorb herbicides. So you've got that on the top, and then a lot of times the corn syrup that's being used is made from corn that also is soaked in herbicides. The fortunate thing about Europeans is that they've put in place some laws that prohibit that, which is a wonderful thing. And so it still gets over there sometimes. Think about, at least for us here in the States, sugar is, it doesn't really create hyperactivity and all of the things that they say it does, because there's not really a connection there. But what it does do is you get this dopamine hit when you have something sweet. Your brain goes, "Oh, that was delicious. Let's do more of that." Our bodies are naturally designed to store glucose, and sugar goes right to glucose in the body. So the body is going to naturally be drawn to eating those things, because your body doesn't know that maybe tomorrow you're going to be in a spot where you don't have food for 6 months. So the body's always going to tend toward reserves rather than tend toward scarcity. So that you've got the fact that it's refined, you've got the fact that it's oftentimes treated with who knows what, you've got the fact that it causes this dopamine hit. All of those things contribute and make sugar a complicated addition to your food. I don't really consider it to be something where it's truly a sensitivity, with the exception of the chemical additions. But I think it throws off your balance. Your body's not, saying, "Oh, well, I had sugar, I'm going to go attack the pancreas." It doesn't do that. But it does shift that balance in your body away from that space of center off to one side, where your body tends toward more sugar, which then leads you to excess weight, insulin resistance, diabetes, metabolic syndrome. All of those diseases of modern society tend to.
So I always think of it, it's almost like it's the good girl's drug, I think.
It is. And the more sugar you have, the more difficult it is for your body to maintain balance.
Didn't you say something about a bitter? Was it a bitter that you recommend for clients who are struggling to kind of give up sugar or get balanced with it or something?
Right. So digestive, you can often find them in the grocery store. You can certainly find them in the liquor stores. It's one of those things that they often put in cocktails to add some flavor and some interest to them. Bitters are generally taken from plants that have something called saponins, which is a soap derivative, and it's bitter. The bitter taste in our body signals coming that might need to have some attention. So the bitter flavor is typically associated with toxins and poisons and things that you shouldn't be eating. So the body has evolved to think that when I taste something bitter, I need to be aware and be ready to digest it and get it out of the body quickly. So when you taste something bitter, it says, okay, I need to increase my digestive enzymes in the saliva, increase stomach acid. I need to be prepared to digest whatever it is that's coming along, which works out great for anybody who's eating something that you might have a sensitivity to,
Okay.
because your body is now prepped to digest that. Your body is prepped to digest the protein and actually get the most out of it nutrition-wise. You digest and process vitamins and minerals out of your food. So instead of having that food go partially undigested through your system, um, bitters also tend to decrease your interest in sugar, because that bitter flavor is ramping up your digestion for heavier foods, proteins and high fiber vegetables. Then you're less interested in having some light, fluffy carbohydrate
Right.
or sugar-based food. So the bitter can be a bit of an appetite suppressant, if you will,
Okay.
for
So it sounds like the bitters take us away from what I call like glamour foods, because I think we're used to,
right.
eating really glamorized foods, and other foods can taste bland. So is so this might sound like a daft question, right? So I'm just listening to you now. I'm remembering when I was an emotional eater. I was a UK size 18 to 20, and I'd, always had problems with my weight until the last kind of 7 or 8 years. And I used to have a lot of like sweet things, but then I would crave something
Mm-hmm.
bitter or sharp. And I'm just wondering if
Mm-hmm.
that was my body's way of saying, give me something that's going to help me process all this crap you've just given me. Yeah.
Possibly so. And I think
Mm,
that oftentimes it does. Your body, and it will start out with a whisper. And
mm,
if you don't pay attention, then that whisper starts getting
yeah.
louder and even louder and louder. And eventually it starts screaming at you and you can't get
Yeah.
out of bed. So, I think that oftentimes those things that we crave are signals that your body
Yeah.
is looking for something different. Unless what you're craving is sugar,
Yeah.
and then that's
Yeah.
not what your
Yeah.
body's
That's a
looking
gut
for.
reaction of a different thing, isn't it?
That is a seeking of
Yeah.
dopamine. So,
Yeah. So I'm just thinking, like, this is about self-care, isn't it, really, and commitment to self, and that whole spiritual practice that you started off saying, which is like the expression. And this is like, how do I want to express my self-care in my life? And it's something that we struggle with
mhm,
so much. It's like, I think one of the things that I find when I'm working with people with like clients with their weight issues is actually taking care of ourselves can feel like a challenge, like emotionally, like we don't deserve to, or there's too much to do, or it can be really difficult to just get going. But once you get going, a momentum takes place. And I
mhm.
think, what you're saying about listening to the whispers rather than the shouts of the body, I don't know if you've got any words that you would like to say for encouraging people so that they don't have to get to that point where life really shouts, that they can make small changes, or anything that you realised about why it was so good to take care of yourself.
Um,
Because
my dog.
there's dogs that need looking after and want
There
playing
you
with,
go.
and there's life, yeah.
There's dogs that need looking after, right? So, I think that is to recognize that you need it, you deserve it. Just because you exist on this world, you are worthy of love and acceptance. That is an inherent part of it that comes from that spiritual connection, that
Yeah,
relationship with yourself. And I think when you build that relationship with yourself, then you're able to step into owning who you are and being okay with who you need to take care of that person, because you have wonderful and amazing gifts to share with the world. And if you're not around, then you're not going to be able to
yeah.
share them. And you're here for a reason. You have a blessing to give to all of us. And you need to step into that self relationship and become confident with who you are and what you're doing here. Even if you're not confident with 100 people around you, you don't have to be confident to stand on stage and
Exactly.
shout, but just confident enough that says, I'm worth it because I have an important job to do. I may not know what that job is, but my being here is important for someone. And so I want to make sure that I can be here in the best possible way for them, and um, just take that on as your
That's
personal
gorgeous. And if you've
responsibility.
got that as a guiding principle for the
But
clients that you work with, like it feels like it's like this magnetic pull, you know, you obviously believe that really strongly about
absolutely.
everybody you work with. I imagine the clients kind of just get almost like sucked into that vortex and they've got no, you have no choice. You've got to take care of yourself. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
we are, God, bleh, I'll not edit that out, but flipping heck, that were a moment. But the other things that I wanted to talk to you about really briefly is you talk about on your website about nourishing your body in a way that builds resilience, which I think we've kind of covered, unless there's anything specific that you want to talk about that, but also strengthens intuition. Tell me about that. I want to know more about that.
Right. Yeah. So, well, I mean, I think anytime that you are able to actually get direct feedback from your body, direct feedback on your symptoms, on how what you're doing um, is how my choices affect the outcome, that gives you that reassurance. Good idea or a bad idea was right on.
Yeah.
So it gives you more of an opportunity to confirm that that intuition is right. And then I can use that intuition not only for food choices, lifestyle choices, those things, but I can use that in
Yeah.
other places as well. Because you start to think, I really do know this. I do hear that voice in the back of my head, or I hear that quiet whisper. I just get this sense that this is the
Yeah.
right thing or the wrong thing. However, you know that, yeah, this is working. So when you have that confidence, it always increases your intuition because you're going to
That's
use it more.
brilliant. So it's kind of like your body is your first port of call, like your relationship with you and your
Hmm.
physical self is the first port of call for getting to know your own intuition, and then you can extend it into other areas of your life as well. Ah, that's not what I thought you were going to say.
Yep.
See, I thought you were going to say, well, when your body gets quieter and you're not as bombarded by everything because you're more centered, then you can hear the whispers more clearly. But that actually is a lot. I mean, that's true as well, but that's a lot more
Right.
practical and straightforward and easy to do today, isn't it? Just start listening to.
Hmm.
So,
Right.
so what would you say? Is there a way that people can think, that's a yes from my body, and that's a no from my body when they're experimenting? Is it as simple as I just feel better, or I feel less worse?
I feel
I
less
know.
worse.
I feel less bad, yeah.
um, well, I think it's going to be different. I think the things that you'll see when you are in balance is you're going to have more energy. You're not going to get to the end of the
Right.
day and fall into bed exhausted. You're not going to have digestive issues. You will have that sense of calm and quiet in your emotional
Yeah. Yeah.
state. You're going to have an ease in interacting with others. When we're out of balance, we tend to withdraw and pull in, and so interacting with others is
Mm,
awkward. When you're in balance, you feel comfortable with those interactions. I think that it will express differently, of course, with everyone, but be balanced
yeah.
and finding yourself in balance in that sense, not necessarily centered, but in a comfortable balance, then that's when you know that what you're doing is working out for you. And I think you can sense that as you're making those choices. You can say, is doing this going to bring me into balance, or is this going to push me toward one side or the other? And you can get that sense of intuition
Mm-hmm.
as you can ask yourself that question.
That's a really insightful answer. And I think the balance or imbalance is an easier one to kind of answer than trying to kind of figure out all the details. That's like a really good way of navigating through those choices. Okay. All right. So final question, which is a bit of a different question.
Okay.
But this, because I reckon there is a link. So how does your spaceship building inform your role as a herbalist?
So yes. Two things. The first one is they are complex problems. Problems that have been heretofore difficult to solve. We have tried to explore beyond our local community here, and we've had trouble doing it. It's a hard problem to solve. Their own health issues, and they've gone to specialist after specialist and feel like their issue is beyond the understanding of the medical community, because they're convinced that it's not just that they're tired or getting older. There's actually something going on, but no one has solved it. So those are difficult problems to solve. And so I'm a problem solver. I connect dots. I share information. I am an educator. I help people understand and build on it and do something beyond. The other connection is that the universe beyond is not all that different from the universe within.
That's making me cry.
If you look at
That's gorgeous.
But, if you look out into the universe, well beyond our solar system, well beyond the galaxy, into the depths of the universe, mirrored when you look deeply within the human body, the space between our cells, the way that our organs have collected in very much, galactic type formations. Those kinds of explorations of the universe out there really mirror what's going on with the universe within us.
Oh, that's so beautiful. That is, I want your job. I want to see some of that too. That is a gorgeous place to leave it. So where can people find you, Lisa? Where can they get hold of you? Where do you live?
Sure. I'm in Colorado here in the United States. You can find me online at Lisa Akers, Akers.com. And also on Facebook at Herbalist Lisa. So you can find me in either of those places, and I would love to chat with anybody who's looking for a greater sense of balance or a deeper relationship with themselves, or having a...
Yeah. Sounds...
And I work virtually, so I can chat with anybody in the world. So you don't have to live here in Colorado.
And I saw on your website that you do like chats to see whether you're a good fit as well, if somebody's just wanting to find out more. Okay.
Right. Yeah. And I've got lots of different opportunities to chat with me, to work with me. Anytime I start working with a client, we'll take a few minutes and just have a conversation.
Yeah.
Is this going to make sense?
Okay. Well, I will put the links to your Facebook group and Facebook page, is it, and your website. And thank you so much for that.
Hey, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me on. This has been a lot of fun.
Okay. Take care. See you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Alrighty. Bye-bye.